Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm only going to make a very short. I've got just a couple of quick questions on this, and that's around the commencement, Mr. Chair. Obviously, you got your stock standard lines that the Governor General is going to, by order of Council, is going to. This bill will become an act into force, but I'm just slightly curious. And maybe the Minister can help me out on this one. And maybe if I'd been on I wasn't on the Select Committee, Mr. Chair, so I'm not privy to this, and maybe one of the colleagues who was will. But Clause 2, sub-clause 2, it actually says, to the extent that has not previously been brought into force under subsection 1, the rest of this Act comes into force on the 1st of April 2017. And I'm not too sure, are there some parts of this Act, Mr. Chair, that actually aren't going to be brought into force for another 2.5 years? Because that would seem like a long time for a bill that professes a level of transparency that is required, and I think this bill brings by and large. I mean, I've outlined some of my concerns are obviously around the charities provisions, and my colleague Claire Curran has talked about those. I still have slight concerns, Mr. Chair, to be honest. Yeah. Well, you know, I do have some slight concerns that if you have operating expenditure between $500,000 and $1 million, that you don't have to get your accounts fully audited. They can be reviewed. The Minister talked about the difference between being reviewed and being audited, and I appreciate that, and I thank the Minister for his input on that. But are there any parts of this Act that actually are not going to be enforced for another 2.5 years? I get the date. I mean, obviously the 1st of April is the beginning of the financial year for 2017, but it is a long time. I think you'll agree, Mr. Chair, between this Act coming into force and actually part of this Act not being law for 2.5 years. And I wonder if there is a reason behind this, and there often are when you get these sorts of acts, because there are processes that are already in place that need to go through to the natural conclusion, and obviously there's no point in having retrospective legislation, even though this isn't technically retrospective. If there is already a process in place or things need to run their course, then I understand that. And 2.5 years does seem like quite a long time, I must admit, Mr. Chair, but there may be something in here that I'm unsure of or I don't know about, and therefore the Minister could enlighten me, or maybe even Ms. Curran could enlighten me on that, because it is quite a long time. And the other thing also is, you know, it's slightly unusual where it says in Clause 2, Subpart 1, where one or more orders may bring different provisions into force during different dates. And I'm just wondering again if this is because of maybe a submission that was put in during the Select Committee process, where for whatever reason it was deemed that this would it just wouldn't all hit the books straight away, that it would have sort of been drip-fed in, and that might have been because, you know, this is about consolidating a lot of the practices that occur in New Zealand and Australia. Am I right there, Ms. Curran? And so there may be reasons behind this, and no doubt there are perfectly good reasons, because, Mr. Chair, we all agree on this. So this is a good bill that I think will bring a level of transparency. I think some of the clauses in here, they're balanced. I think some of the clauses in here may be open to jurisprudence as we go forward. As mentioned, Mr. Chair, I have real concerns when the Registrar of Companies has the ability to allow an auditor who has been struck off to continue to practice under certain circumstances. And we did talk about this, and I did allude to this, but I'm just curious to know, are there any parts of this Act in particular that are not going to come into play for another 2.5 years? And that's my only question, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Members, we come to the vote on the clauses. Question is, a Clause 1 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is, a Clause 2 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
I move
the Honourable Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move supplementary order paper number 470, dividing the bill.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. I'll report this bill with amendment and so divided.
Excellent. Well done. I see, right here.
Peter.
I've got some further amendments to table. Can I table them at the start?
Members, we now come to the Gambling Amendment Bill